can't do that. You following the Dram Nation comments online or no?
No, I'm not, unfortunately. Okay. I can, but that means I've got to lean forward.
Lean in.
I want to lean in.
Okay, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, just double checking all the streams are working. Bear with me here for a moment. We go live every night, so it's always good just to make sure it's all actually working. And we've got a... Okay, we are live across every platform, as always, every night. Let's have a look here. Okay, well, we're live on the page as well, which is handy to know.
Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Matt Bailey, and I'm joined again by a repeat offender guest on my show, Matt Wooler from Dram Nation. Welcome back, Matt. Good to see you again.
Yes, I am. I'm here. I'm back.
Yeah, and you've been on a few times. I always say that, but it's like
too many.
5, 6, 7 times at least officially, and then if you count in all the Friday night ones as well, probably close to 20 times. Yes. Which is exciting. So okay, some feedback there. All good. We're all good. Again, good to see you, mate. Hope you're well. Steve Oates, Nick Huzak, everyone joining in. Thank you so much. We're talking tonight about tastings. Now, when it's not a big stream tonight, we're going to go for a little bit here, just talking about whiskey tastings and about events. And we've touched on a bit before about what events look like pre-COVID, post-COVID, all that kind of discussion. So that's kind of been already talked about a fair bit. But I wanted to talk about sort of more of the experiential side of it and taking a longer view. Now, I might just kick us off by saying, just giving the audience a bit of context. You do events quite often, outside of COVID times, of course. And you've always had a particular focus on. I mean, your focus has always been on flavor first and foremost, which is the most interesting part. And the best part about that is you're not tied to any brand in particular. You're not.
No.
And so that means you're able to actually have that freedom and flexibility around it. However, and you've had a particular focus out west as well, Western Sydney, which is, as we've talked about before, a neglected market for brand ambassadors and reps. However, what I want to touch on today was looking at the longer scope of things, like, from the early days of the society in Australia, we were hosting whiskey tastings and no one else was. This is like, we're talking 2000. Whiskey was not a thing that was regularly, there weren't events regularly being held around that sort of time. 2002, I should be more accurate. And they were sort of big sort of tastings with a big room and people enjoying them. And we've looked at, even in more recent years, we've gone through sort of whiskey pairings, dinners, Boilermakers, flavor pairings, coffee and whiskey, rum and whiskey, all those kind of things and all those kind of events. What have you seen change and what do you think it looks like? That's really the question I want to pose, and we can sort of work around that a bit tonight.
Change, not necessarily to do with COVID, just changed
not just with COVID, but we'll look at the future as well. But yeah.
Well, people avoid, like, come the late 2000s, you saw people start to really want information more than just a distiller's story or a brand ambassador's story and selling them the marketing. They wanted to know more about actually the distillery, or they wanted to know more about how it was made and so on and so forth. And that really pushed a lot of that blogging element that influenced a lot of, well, us even getting into what we're doing now. By learning about that and then imparting it onto other people. And there was a big interest in that. And it also saw that boom of the big whiskey events here in Australia. And of course, our big whiskey events in Australia are a far cry from what we hear about what goes on overseas in similar related.
Well, that can often be a consequence of population size and
population. Exactly. So yeah, population and I guess it's a pretty broad market in what that is dealt with, and they've had their continued success. Although I think that they're even at oversaturated point pre-COVID, in that there was too many of them happening at too many times, and people just had to make that choice. Which event do I go to? Because I'm going to be drinking exactly the same whiskey no matter which one I go to. Yeah. Less Whiskey Fair, which makes a focus on that. So you still have that opportunity. And then when it comes to the smaller tastings, you saw a lot more people having tastings at home, and actually getting people like us in, which they're still doing now, to come do a tasting for friends and family type thing, or maybe it's a party situation. And the concept of, and I think that's a reflection of the concept of that whiskey is no longer, well, here in Australia anyway, is no longer something that is an elitist product. People want to be able to share it with other people, their friends, and they almost don't care anymore as to whether they have that that history of whiskey, or whether they do or don't know anything about it. It's like, I love this stuff and I want to drink it anytime. I don't want to just drink it in the evening after a meal. I want to have it 12 o'clock in the afternoon over lunch. I want to have it after I've mowed the lawn type thing. And it's people's perceptions, or the way in which they're dealing with the product, is now very, very different. They're much more, it's more, I guess, holistic in their life, if you want to classify it that.
Yeah.
And I think the tastings themselves need to take in, and this is something that Dram Nation's always focused on, but it's more the case of tastings need to take in how, if they're going to a tasting, how can they take that home and use it again in their life, whether it's in their cooking or whether it's in the party that they're having or something along those lines. And it's even, and I think this is partly to do with it, and it's not just gin related, but people want to have more than just whiskey as well. They don't want that element anymore of, you can only have whiskey with whiskey, and I can't talk about anything else when we're having whiskey. It's like, yeah, I want to have cognac at the same time, or I'm going to have a beer and I'm going to have a rum, and I might make some cocktails at home to go with it. And I think tastings in themselves might have to take in more spirits in regards to whiskeys.
Yeah. And I can see that happening, especially in the way that experiences are crafted around that. Just in that point, though, of you're saying that it's become a lot more sort of holistic, for lack of a better word, but the where it's being used and utilized outside of just, it's just your Saturday night drink. It's being sort of far broader usage of the spirit. Yep. Do you think that's being driven by these experiences, or do you think that's being sort of like perpetuated by, or do you think that's a byproduct of, or it's not even associated?
The experiences, as in,
well, I mean, all over.
Partly, yeah, I think so.
I mean, we've got to understand this is. I mean, it's a very small subsect of whiskey drinkers who go to whiskey tastings and events and experiences. Like very, very small.
Yes. Yeah.
That's one you got to remember. I mean, like you'll see 1,000 people go through the doors of Whiskey Live or something, and you'll only ever see sort of maybe 50 of those at whiskey events and other experiences.
Yeah. And I think it does drive. I know a lot of people that have come to my tastings, and they've come over several times, and then it's like they'll come to another tasting and they'll quite literally say, "Hey, I'm actually I've done my own at home," and it's they can take certain elements of it. But
yeah, home tastings is something that I want to jump into in a second, actually, because that's actually something that's changed a lot over the years. There's a lot of comments coming in, which is great. Evening from James Finnegan. G'day everyone from Billy. Looking forward to my next tasting with a few mates soon, says James. Yeah, it's true. Good to see, Jim. And Billy says, the sharing and drinking with friends is certainly the best part of tasting, whether it's at home or in a bar. The whiskey is great, but it's always better with other people. That's true. And that's why I do enjoy a dram on my own sometimes, but at the same time, I save most of my best whiskeys to be opened or consumed with people who I know will appreciate it, and friends who I know will actually like drinking them with me. So yeah, I totally get that, Billy. And I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. Adrian Graham and a few other people have said, Darren and Adrian have all said evening Matts, plural, evening Matt and Matt as well. And Dula says, what a sexy duo. Dula and away from Matt Whisker. And Scott Fitzsimon says, no gloss, just Matt tonight.
Yes.
Well done, Scotty. Well done.
It's a dad joke. That's a dad joke.
While Scotty's here, actually, I'm going to credit him, well, not specifically him. Sorry, Scotty, but I'm going to credit the Oak Barrel, of which he represents, as a huge part of my whiskey journey. Some of the very first tastings that I remember going to learn about whiskey were actually in the back room of the Oak Barrel.
Yep, absolutely. And Not that, and I was going to get to a point which sort of, it's a reflection of what the oak barrel was and how Scotty has changed it quite a lot, quite often. But other times that room does dictate certain layout features. But we would all probably remember that going to tastings constantly, and it was just row by row by row, facing forward. It wasn't designed to be a communication or a people chatting situation, which is what and so that's one of the main things I always have done with Dram Nation. Even when it's tastings, I make sure that my tastings are always about 24 or less. I don't aim for anything more than that. I want people to sit across from each other. I want them to be able to commune and talk just like they would at home. And for those older elements, those older days of tastings that we were seeing here in Australia, it was like just walking into a room and you're in a lecture theatre type situation. And it commanded the attention of the individual talking, but you went in and you just listened and you were done and you left, and you couldn't talk to each other about it. And even in those early days of, like, one of the first whiskey tastings I went to was Glenmorangie. I think it was Garth's first Glenmo, or he had just fallen into the Glenmo role. And it was at the Oak Barrel. And that was a hefty, we're talking 10 years ago, even more. That was a hefty $85 ticket for 5 core expressions. And it was back to back, looking straight up the room. But
isn't that crazy? Isn't that just crazy to think that you're like $85 for 5 core range whiskeys 10 years ago? And yet a lot of society events that we do are like $79 for 6 cask strength single casks.
Absolutely.
Like there's like in that realm anyway. So it's like, and I say the same when it comes to bottle pricing as well. Like it's one of my favorite examples was I found an outturn, or sorry, it wasn't even called outturn then, it was called bottling list. From the society, and it was a 2005 bottling list. So it was 15 years ago, and it had a 73.12 or something in the list, right? So it was this 12th ever cask from Distillery 73. Lovely distillery, and it was a 15-year-old first fill bourbon cask. Okay, so it was a 15-year-old first fill bourbon, and it was about $185 in 2005. We released a 15-year-old first fill bourbon cask from that same distillery about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or whatever it was, and it was $170. So you go, well, actually, even just adjusting for inflation, we've actually it's all trended down a little bit, and in tasting events, in ticketing, in bottlings, in experiences, have all actually become more affordable for people to get into it in many ways.
But and that's not to begrudge or whatever the price. I'm not complaining about the price. I wanted to pay that.
No.
I wanted to be in that. I wanted to be part of that event. And I was hitting up almost every other whiskey tasting that. And this is when Dave Withers was managing most of that. Was he managing most of it? Actually, I don't even know that Dave was actually in the whiskey role at that stage. I don't think it was. No. But I wanted it because there was nothing else that was happening with this. And this was at the same period where brands were like, oh, you know what? This is probably actually a smart thing to be doing. And you would walk out of that event and be like wanting to talk about it, wanting to go try more whiskey and things like that. And at different times, of course, and different influences. But I think the tastings are becoming much more, they need to be much more, they encompass the group or bring the group in, bring the people in as part of the tasting. Don't let them just sit on the bench and listen type thing. And I think that's a bit of the problem that we see with some of the older school, not ambassadors, but we see the older school distilleries coming out here and
not really understanding that side of the market.
No, the dynamics, like group dynamics is really important.
Well, group dynamics and reading the room and on the spot and that kind of stuff is really important. But at the same time, it's like that. Your first point there about interactivity at tastings is something that's we've spent a fair bit of time recently reinvestigating for when events are all back on board. And it's fascinating because you've got to again on that kind of thing. You've really got to strike that the perfect balance. Now now think of it like a comedy show, right? if you go to a comedy show and the comedian's just reeling off jokes, and you can feel it scripted, and it's like, oh, every joke's just like, yeah, you did the same set last night and everything.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And there's the opposite end of the comedy spectrum, and I love stand up, so I'm using that as an example. But the opposite end of the comedy spectrum is where heaps of audience participation, and they like pick on people in the front row and makes jokes at their expense and all that kind of stuff. Yep. And that turns some people way off. And the other way it does as well, though, just where it's a scripted read. It's like, well, I could have just watched that on Netflix.
Yep.
So you got to find that really balancing point of interactivity, I think, in a tasting as well. Like if it's, a deconstructing, like we've done before, deconstructing a single malt and those kind of things I think are really interesting. But if it comes down to sort of putting people on the spot and give us your tasting notes and kind of stuff, and all that kind of approach, you can get a bit sort of much.
Well, that's why even with what I do, it's like, and I've done that since the early days, is I'll compose some basic notes on the whiskies that we're tasting.
Yeah,
they're really short.
Yeah.
They're really short, and they're my notes. And I need to make that really clear to people when we start. It's like, these are my notes. They are relative to what I know and what I've experienced. They're not relative to what the official tasting notes are. And I found even more so, people seem to respond a lot more to tasting notes that I'll write, or someone else will write, or whatever, but tasting notes, but write them in almost like a paragraph form. Keep a flow, so don't stilt it so hard. And that goes back to how I was sort of talking about working with the room and being dynamic, is that even in your tasting notes, be dynamic in your tasting notes, and it just gets people involved. Look, things can go totally off the rails, and they do so often, in that there'll be an entire table that is just into it too much, and they're making so much noise, and they're loving it. And they're loving it, but you can see other people are really frustrated by it.
Yeah.
And you need to try and reel them in, but there's only so much you can do. Otherwise, you'll damage their dynamics. And that's the thing. They are there for their dynamics. That's why you sell a group ticket, or a group or a party. You want a group to come, because the group is going to really take something away with it from there. They've shared an experience within themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's just one of those things we need to sort of encompass. And that's why even doing sometimes things that don't just straight up whiskey, and it doesn't have to be straight up cocktails or anything like that to go with it, but
no,
it means that they can bring other people along that maybe aren't really into whiskey, but they like other things, and it might still, the dynamics could be really good. And they are really good.
Dave, Tom, Ryan, Alex, thank you to everyone who's just joined in. And that's Alex Darlenberg for those watching. Good to see you, Alex. Hope you're well. James Finnegan very nicely writes, really enjoy the layouts for the SMWS tastings, as you get to sit in a room at a table talking with other enthusiasts about different ideas about the whiskey being enjoyed. I mean, that's the kind of a whole approach to the society right there, Jim. That's the whole thing. It's about like-minded people coming together and drinking whiskey and discussing great flavors. And I think that's really what it's about. So yeah, thanks for that comment. Joss, Caleb, Irina, everyone else joining in, thank you so much. But look, going back to that point about it, it's about sort of reading the room, and I think what we've seen, I'm interested to explore also, where, apart from interactivity, where else do you think we, whiskey experiences as a whole package is sort of heading? Because we've seen a lot of changes even in the last 5 years.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of things change, and you and I have discussed them at length before. And it's like this. Where do you think that looks? What do you think like 2025 looks like in that space?
2025. That's too far ahead.
It's only 5 years away.
Man, I don't think. I don't know whether you can. I don't know whether you can project that far ahead.
It doesn't involve in my head, but it's 2020 right now. So there you go.
I don't know. I don't know whether you can really look that far ahead and be like, as we've said, the things that have changed in the last 10 years in regards to how people approach it. I'll give you my take. Honestly,
I reckon in the next 5, we're going to see, I think, the diversity of offering split even further away, in a way, as in, like, in a good way. As in, like, I think we're going to have whiskey tastings that are they'll be free, and they'll be like a drink on arrival, and then you taste the latest release of something, and that's it kind of approach, whatever, like promo event, if you like. and then you're going to have the $1,000 ticket dinners on the other end.
Yeah, those big spectrum there, like on that type of spectrum, absolutely, we'll see more and more of that, and I think we'll see more brands invest in it in a more constructive way. Society works really, well, and that's the thing. Society works really hard at those special dinners. Like it's got to be the right whiskey and it's got to be the right time, and there's only the right people that you really like. Franz, the right people you involve in that. You can't risk it as much, and we do tend to see that sometimes the brands want to dabble in it, and then they risk certain situations, and it sometimes it works, sometimes it is disastrous. But
I think
the other
you and
thing
I
is
both had that disastrous one.
A few of them. But the other thing is what I love. Actually, what I've seen. This is something that we're sort of off, and sometimes we give brand ambassadors a hard time, which is wrong. Which the way we're talking is that we have seen brand ambassadors become or own brands, or they become immersed in the brand so much that they talk about it in a way as though they've lived it, and they know that they don't just know the history, they know that the feeling of the brands, as opposed to reading from a script. And I love that. I love it when we see brand ambassadors that hold that element of passion, and it doesn't feel like they're just, in the last year I used to work for this and now I've moved and suddenly I'm no longer going to talk about that brand, and suddenly this one is like the most amazing thing that I've ever had. And it's like, we can see the falsity in that. We can see but when it comes to them really holding that love, and I think that really imparts a different thing on the audience. The audience can see through the falsehoods that can come with it. And I love the fact that there's just so many brand ambassadors now that, like, you'd think they were born into the brand type thing. It's like they're so immersed, and I think that really helps as well. And that changes the dynamics of tastings.
Yeah, especially if it's true. And look, I'm sure you can recall experiences like this as well. But I'll rewind again. 5 years ago, I remember there was a certain brand ambassador, obviously, who shall remain nameless, and I'm pretty sure they don't work in the trade anymore. And there's a good reason for that, because they were acting as a sales rep, and they didn't understand the product, and they weren't being an ambassador for it; they were being a sales rep for it. And I think there is a massive divide between sales and ambassadorial work, and I think you can do both, and great. But if it's very rare to do both, and it's probably
that's the other thing, isn't it? People are coming to tastings and they don't want to be sold anything. They already know what they're there for.
Yeah, they know what they're there, exactly.
Yeah. I'm there to taste this, and I'm probably tasting it because I can't afford to buy it, but I want to know what it's like, and I want to know what these other things are like. Don't sell it to me. I already know where I am.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, because I'm actually reminded of it. It was a comment that I think it was in his book, actually. It was a comment that Pip Hills, the founder of the SMWS back in the 1980s, made about how to how to get the word about the society out there. And the answer was, just pour liquid into the glass, and the rest looks after itself. It's like, pour some into a glass, let people assess it for the quality that it is. And I don't need to run ads. I don't need to run newspaper ads. And this is 1983, remember? And the whiskey will speak for itself, and it did for a very long time in that regard. It still does. It's like if you put it in the glass, and that's exactly that society events, as you've seen as well as yours. You put whiskey in the glass, and you can talk as much as you like about something, but it only makes sense once you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
As soon as you engage the nose and the mouth, and rather than just the ears and the eyes, it's like, well, there you go.
That's why I don't like to tell people what they're smelling. It's like, these are my notes. This is what I sort of get out of it. But reality is, it's whatever you got. It's scary when someone will come in and go for the first time type thing, and you'll say, oh, what do you smell, blah, blah. And they'll say, smells like metho. It's like, Jesus Christ, if you're smelling metho like that, then I want some of that. Oh my God. but
I think I was actually at your tasting when someone said that. I think I remember that very line. I remember turning around going, what?
It's pretty common. But I love to kick that back on people, because the reality is you can take something like methylated spirits, and if you hold it at the right positioning, you get vanilla and raspberry coming out of those flavors, because the distillation process offers certain things. So, and it's like, well, actually, maybe you're right at some level. But if you don't bring that to them in a way that it's like, well, embrace the flaws that they're seeing, don't shun them or tell them that it's wrong, because that's all they've experienced maybe, and let's apply it and let's have fun. And I think once people sort of, they ease into it, they also realize it's not so fuddy-duddy as it I guess it's stuffy as it used to be. But I'm not going to say that I didn't dream of having a Chesterfield chair and a kilt and drinking whiskey with a cigar in my hand next to the fireplace.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's look, as funny as non-fuddy-duddy as whiskey has become, especially in the last few years, especially with a much firmer approach to flavor and to people rather than Chesterfields and kilts and whatnot. I still get where you're coming from. It's something about that image which is kind of cool. And maybe that's going to be the next comeback in whiskey. We're going to go back to almost like a throwback, a bit like people are obsessed with the 90s at the moment or something. Darren Howie says, let the whiskey do the talking. Absolutely. That's exactly the point. And Andy Davis says, some new makes I've nosed were like Metho.
Yep. Well, look, you as I was saying, you muck around with it, go get some, and see if. Sorry, I'm just checking to see that what was going on there. Is that and you got things like petroleum, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's distilled in the same way. It's still doing the same thing, and what we smell at the service station, these are flavors that are added. These are actually deliberate flavors added to the smell in order to define the differences between this shit.
Look, I'm reminded of the times I've said that Campbelltown whiskey has an almost Campbelltown whiskey often has that diesel note. I've said.
Yeah.
And I love the smell of diesel. Absolutely love it. I do. Like, I love the smell of diesel fumes. Here's a bit of trivia that some society members watching might not know. One of my first jobs out of high school was I was first year university and I needed to support myself, and I was 18 or something, and I got a job working behind the desk at a fuel station.
Yep.
And I was just a petrol station attendant, and I just remember the smell of the pumps and having to clean them, because it was like once a shift you go out and clean all the pumps and all that kind of stuff. And I remember not enjoying that part of the job very much, but I remember the smell off the pumps though wasn't very desirable. But across the way was across the other side of the forecourt, as they called it, was the diesel pump, and there was a diesel fume because it often leaked. It was a leaky pump. It was an old fuel station. So it was the diesel pump, and the guys, the truckies that used it always spilt fuel everywhere. So it was like it had this certain aroma when you're around that area. It was an amazing aroma. It is like that rich sort of, I can't even describe it. It's a very savory note, and I love that smell in a whiskey as well.
Yeah, and so I challenge people to actually go out, and next time you're opening a bottle of methylated spirits to clean something, pour a little bit in your nosing glass, and you've got to hold it out here though. Like, you do not bring it up close.
Don't get too close to that one.
You bring it out, you get it at the right angle, you will get, more than likely, you'll get raspberries and vanilla. And that is such a common flavor that comes from grain-based distillate.
Yeah.
Even before it gets to because I have to assume, because I'm not a chemist, I have to assume it's the process that's very similar.
Yeah.
That actually extracts those elements. So I know
there's a couple of distillers I know who used to work as petroleum distillers.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. They do exist, and that it's not too far from the tree. Before we finish up, what have you been dramming on?
Me, I have a Glenlivet 15. It's a French Oak Reserve.
Oh, very nice.
It is this thing is always good. It really is. It's very consistent. I actually did have some chocolate that I was going to open, but because I'm still drinking this beer, I'm not combining chocolate and beer, but a nice bit of dark chocolate. And I do find that one does tend to work well with my palate with chocolate.
Good old Moser Roth. Good old Moser Roth. It's good stuff, Roth. It's an Aldi chocolate, right? And it's bloody awesome.
It rocks. It rocks. I use it in tastings all the time. All the time.
Yeah, I know you do. They're great. It's great stuff. It's honestly, it's way better than Cadbury and better than Lindt. I'd go so far to say as well. But
no, I'll classify that. Maybe next time we'll maybe we can talk some bourbon next time. But one of the things that I use I guess we're totally off the mark, but we're not off the mark because this actually will bring it back a little bit, is that for years when I do work with other brands at Whisky Show, Whisky Fair, anything like that, I will always take in the not Kettle. What's the brand? Well, maybe it's Kettle. Maybe it's the other one. The salted
Red
caramel.
Rock.
Yeah, the salted caramel popcorn.
Oh, right.
That stuff works so well with almost every whiskey. I don't know whether it's the caramel. I don't know whether it's the popcorn. I don't know whether it's the salt that's in there. It's probably a combination of all. But when I put that stuff on the table, and I'll bring this stuff along in my own accord. The brands don't pay for it. I'll just bring a heap of bags of it. That stuff gets rifled so fast.
Then you've got it. Fairs.
Well, some of them, yeah, for sure. No, but you got to hide it quite often and just bring it out. And it's that homely element that people can take home straight away and just go, I can do that at home. I can enjoy whiskey with a friend and I can have something like that. Yeah. I don't have to have this special type of cheese and this special type of bread, this sourdough that's gone through this and this and this, and this special salted butter and all that crap that's amazing, but highly expensive and also inaccessible to most people.
Yeah.
And you can bring something really, really simple and just go, you know what? Whiskey works with popcorn, bourbon especially, just bang, popcorn. So much fun.
Yeah. Very cool. I love finding unexpected pairings like that. And that's kind of like, we did a themed tasting once in Sydney and Melbourne, which was called that, which is along those lines about unexpected pairings, about flavors that wouldn't expect to go together, but they do. But I need to try that popcorn one. We mostly used other spirits at that tasting, actually. We mostly used cognac and rum and Armagnac and things like that. But yeah.
Look, the tastings I do, quite often I'm getting those chocolate covered marshmallows with coconut on them, whatever they're called. Those snow things or whatever they call them.
Yeah, snowball.
Yeah, snowball things. The donuts. Jesus, donuts.
Yeah.
Donuts. They work so well at tasting. And people are so shocked quite often that I'll see it and I go, the first time they've come along, it's like, donuts, you're guaranteed in like 10 minutes. All the donuts are gone off the table. Everyone has just knocked them off. And that's what I think, not with Dram Nation, because this is no promo on Dram Nation. I think just in general, as the brands wake up to their own dynamics in cultures, and this is the other thing, I think quite often we've seen a lot of brands being driven in their tastings by the culture being enforced by Scotland or whatever, is that actually let's take on the culture that it is. And I think that's one of the things that has been recognized quite often with society, Australia's society, is how different it is to the Scottish version of it.
Yeah.
Like it's for lack of a better word, we're pretty loose here overall. And society is a much more loose approach to it, even from the live streams.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, the UK do live streams. They don't do them every day, and they don't do them as loose as we do them, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is you need to embrace the culture and what the culture is absorbing. You can't be different to the culture itself.
No.
And taste it. Like, this is all the things we've seen sort of mingle into tastings these days.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, at least, because I really haven't been to any overseas. I can't say I've actually been to any overseas. So I don't know how they're approaching things. But here, those sort of like encompassing dynamics can be, really good. Even bringing like me, my God, if you put something like baklava on the table in a whiskey tasting, damn, that stuff's got like 5 minutes on the table if you are lucky.
Yeah. And then it's all sticky. Don't worry.
Yeah. The glasses are filthy. I hate that stuff, but the people love it. And it's like, but that's why I have I have a glass for every whiskey. I don't refill glasses so that people have a clean glass at least. But like the foods, you just get out there and a lot of people I always find a very, even at home, when they want to do their pairings, they're really strict, and they're only strict because that's what other people do, or that's what society is sort of promoted. And these whiskey tastings can give them that to take home. And if you can take it home, it can promote it. And I think that's also the acceptance that people will drink whiskey at home, and they will drink different whiskeys at home, and they will make different cocktails at home. And you need to offer them something more than what they can do at home.
Well, I mean, even look at our mutual friend Jonathan, who's gone to the effort of making perfectly cubed clear ice and everything like that for his home cocktails. He's taken it to the next level. And good on him. Jonathan, if you're watching, or if you watch this later, that's right. You got sprung.
That's right. Step up. You got to step up now. People are able to achieve the perfect ice. So what are you going to do? What are you gonna do?
What's the next step exactly?
I think that human element more than anything else. I think that's what the tastings distill everything we've spoken about.
Yeah.
You need to make it more people-ish.
Yeah.
You need to just
exactly. Yeah. That's true. Well, look, thanks for the chat tonight.
Absolutely.
It's good to have a sort of a debrief about sort of events and stuff and experiences and how that looks. And I really appreciate everyone who tuned in and watched along. And this is just my cue to say that Outturn is being launched tomorrow for reading for next Friday's release. It's always the first Friday of every month except for Christmas.
It hasn't arrived in my mail yet.
Oh, not yet. It's coming. It's coming. But
tomorrow, you promised. You heard that, everyone. It's Australia Post is delivering tomorrow.
Outturn will be available to read tomorrow. We're very excited by this. There's, of course, like I said, not one, but 2 Vault Collection modelings, a really exciting Malt of the Month, and a few other goodies in here, of course. Tomorrow night, you can catch myself and Andrew Durbidge, our cellar master, and we're going to be tasting through all 5 of the weird, wacky, and wonderful whiskies that came in your packs. I've got mine ready to go for tomorrow night, all set, and I'm really looking forward to sharing those with you live.
I'm coming over. I'm coming in your place.
Right. Okay, sure.
I'll bring the chicken as long as I can taste that stuff.
And Alex says, hi, Jen.
Deal.
Delhi. Sorry, I missed it. Don't worry, Alex. Good to see you. And thanks again, Matt. And we'll
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, stay there. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you all tomorrow night for our live with Andrew Durbidge and myself. Cheers.